Why did it take so long? Okay. Okay. It's online. Hey, welcome. We're going to be doing a Bible study, John chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. As always, I use New King James Version. My Bible is the Cultural Study Bible. And let's get ready to rock. Sorry, getting ready here. Okay, let's go. This is John, the Gospel of John, chapter 2. Verses 1, so the verse 1 just starts at the 2, and then verse 12 is what we're going to read today. I'm going to read it, and then we'll talk about it. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water pots with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw some out now, and take it to the master of the feast." And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom. And he said to him, "Every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now." This beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he, his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they did not stay there many days. Let me do this. All right, so before we start out, the Gospel of John, written by the Apostle John, was written so that people may believe. Over 100 times in the Gospel of John, John uses the word believe. So the purpose of the Gospel of John is to believe in Jesus. That's it. That's why the Apostle John wrote this book. So now we're going to be talking about chapter 2. What I want to do real fast, and I wish I would have marked this, is that we're going to go later in the book of John to chapter 20. Let me turn here real fast. You just turn until you see John and then 20 up in the top. John 20. Sorry. Still haven't figured this stuff out. Okay, so this is John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31. This says, "And truly, Jesus did many other signs." There's that word, signs. See, we just saw that Jesus turned water to wine, right? That was the first sign. "And truly, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book." So John is saying Jesus did a lot more stuff that we're not going to put here in this book. And he did it in front of me and his disciples. "But these," here you go, "these are written that you may believe." God gives us his book, God gives us his Bible, God gives us the Gospels so that we may believe. Believe what? That Jesus is the Christ. What's the Christ? The Anointed One, the Son of God. Who's the Son of God? Jesus. And that believing you may have life in his name. That's it. That's Christianity, folks. That's why John wrote this book. That's why the gospel exists. All right, now let's get into the text. This is a continuation, so it's on the third day. Usually Jewish weddings last up to a week. This is not saying that the third day of the wedding is this day. It's saying the third day as a continuation from what we saw in chapter 1. So on the third day, so this is like a jam-packed week. If you can imagine Jesus coming down to get baptized and then his apostles following him, and then all of a sudden they go straight into a wedding. That's what's going on here. Jesus goes, he gets baptized beyond the Jordan, where John the Baptist is in chapter 1, and then they head back to Galilee, which is where Jesus is from. It's where most of these apostles are from. And they go to a wedding. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit, but they go to Cana, which is going to be smaller than Jesus' hometown. Jesus' hometown was a place called Nazareth. Remember in chapter 1, people were like, hey, can anything good come from Nazareth? So Cana was smaller than Nazareth. This is Galilee, all the same region. So this is really small. Think about small town. People would have known each other. They would have grown up with each other. People might have known Jesus and his mom because they're all from Galilee, and they could have invited his disciples, not knowing that they were actually disciples of Jesus, because this is the third day right after all this stuff happened in chapter 1. So all these people could have been invited to this small town in this small place at this wedding, which is traditional. Jewish weddings last a week. And a couple little background that you need to know is before a wedding happens, the husband is going to prepare his place for the wife. This is deeply rooted in Jewish culture, first century culture, which is what we have to think of whenever we read this stuff. Don't read this as a 21st century person with internet. Read it as someone who was there. Weddings took a week, but they were big deals. See, the husband, the bridegroom is that name, the bridegroom prepared a place for the bride. And this would have taken a long time. Normally, Jewish families lived together. So if I'm a bridegroom and I ask someone to marry me and we are betrothed, we wait until I have prepared for her a place. I've either added on to my parents' house, because a lot of families live clustered together, multiple generations lived under the same roofs, or I built her a house or whatever, but I've prepared her a place. Now, in addition to that preparation, the bridegroom's the guy that's in charge of the wedding. He is throwing this feast for his spouse. This is the big event. This is a huge, huge thing. Now, depending on, your faith background, there are a lot of people that say that because Jesus was at this wedding, that weddings are somehow elevated. I think, and this is just how I read the scriptures, Jesus affirms weddings because, he goes to them. And it's supposed to say that this is like the weddings are a big deal. One man, one woman, that's what God says in Genesis 2, verse 24, a man shall leave his parents and shall join with his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So this has been the definition of wedding, and this is the definition of biblical marriage since the beginning. But when Jesus went there, and by the way, the Bible calls weddings the grace of life. I mean, if you can imagine, and some of you all might not think that, but if you can imagine two independent people becoming one flesh, considered being one flesh under God's eyes. That's the merging of two independent spirits, two independent people into one flesh. That's a really big deal, and there's a lot to learn from marriage. It's a very unique, very special relationship, and so Jesus obviously is affirming that. Now, I want to point out here that it says the mother of Jesus. Never says her name. We know that that's Mary, but this is the mother of Jesus was there. So Jesus' mom was there, his disciples were invited, and they go to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, now remember, if the bridegroom's supposed to be preparing a place, and the bridegroom's supposed to be preparing, we'll just say the husband. If the groom, because the bridegroom's a weird word, but the groom prepares the wedding, prepares the place to stay, and after all that preparation, then he comes, gets his bride. And here's the thing. The bride is always supposed to be ready. So if the bridegroom comes and gets her at midnight, she's supposed to be ready to rock. Like she's supposed to be ready to be taken to where she's going to go. And this is the culture of anticipation and imminence that surrounds a wedding. Likewise, if you're a Christian, the Christian church, is the bride of Christ. So we are supposed to be waiting with anticipation of Christ's imminent return, just as a woman, just as a spouse, just as the bride would have been waiting in anticipation and imminent return of her bridegroom. But the bridegroom is supposed to plan all this stuff, and they ran out of wine. So that is already a mark on him. He's obviously demonstrating that he cannot provide, he can't plan. This is really embarrassing. Jewish culture, Jewish wedding, 7 days, small town, lots of people invited, and they ran out of wine. Embarrassing. The mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." Now I want to go on this. It doesn't talk about Joseph, Jesus' earthly father. See, Jesus was conceived by the Holy Spirit in Mary. He has no earthly father. He has no earthly father. Let me turn that off. He has no earthly father, but Joseph isn't here. Now, a lot of people read a lot of into this, and there's multiple different ways that you can talk about stuff and examine the relationship of, Jesus' mom to Jesus. I believe the Bible, so I believe that Mary was just like me, just like you. She's a sinner. She's not perfect. Look what she does. She goes to Jesus and she says they have no wine. I look at this and I say, this is right after Jesus was baptized. This is right after Jesus said that he is the Messiah. And after John the Baptist started pointing out to him, who he is. But I think Mary's just used to relying on Jesus. He's smart. He's wise. The book of, I think it's Luke, talks about when Jesus was 12 years old. He said, hey, I got to be about my Father's business whenever he was left behind in the tabernacle. And he was learning and asking questions and teaching the scriptures as a 12-year-old. So Jesus is really smart. He's not dumb. But again, remember when John the Baptist was saying, hey, I didn't know that this was the guy. That doesn't mean that John the Baptist didn't know him. It just means that Jesus has not been living a life going around telling people that, hey, I'm the Messiah. So when Mary says to him, they have no wine, not only is she stating an obvious, but she's coming to him going, hey, we need to fix stuff. So the way that I read this is, Mary is in the habit of looking at Jesus going, hey, can you solve stuff? Which, if you think about it, what's Jesus going to do? Is he going to go buy wine? Is he going to go get wine? So I don't want to read so much into this. What I want to pay attention is this. Jesus said to her, woman. Now don't get mad. That's basically like the same thing as ma'am or madam. So if I see a woman on the street or like a stranger woman that I don't know, I'm just going to say, ma'am. It's respectful, but it's also like I don't know you. But this is him saying it to his mom. So there are faith traditions that say that Mary has a special place in Jesus' life. And yeah, she does. She is his earthly mother. But this is right after Jesus says, you're going to see a lot of cool things. The heavens are going to open up. That God, angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Jesus just said to his disciples, I'm the Messiah. I'm the guy. And as this is the case, Jesus is now on his timetable. Right? He's on his divine timetable, and he says, woman, I think this is the departure. Mary has always looked to Jesus going, hey, we need solutions. They have no wine. Jesus, help. They have no wine. And now this is Jesus going, hey, I'm the Son of Man. Woman, what does your concern have to do with me? He's basically saying, ma'am, not mother, ma'am, what you care about, how does what you care about have to do with me? Seems pretty. Don't read like offense or meanness or coldness into this, but he's talking to his mom. I think this is now Jesus speaking as the Christ. Not that he hasn't always been the Christ, but now his ministry is beginning. See, this is a small wedding here in Nowheresville, Galilee, Cana, Galilee, and Jesus is about to demonstrate to all these people what's going on. He's about to say, what's up? So, my hour has not yet come. I love this phrase because Jesus' hour is on the cross. Anytime he's talking about his hour, Jesus came to die for sin. Jesus did not come to turn water to wine, although he did. He did not come to teach smart things, although he did. Jesus came to die on the cross. He came to rise from the grave. If he did not do that, we don't care about who Jesus is. That's it. So Jesus is saying, woman, ma'am, what does your concern about people running out of wine have to do with me? My ministry is about removing sin. My ministry is not about doing things and solving people's problems. So right there, you've got an appropriate relationship. Listen, ma'am, what does your concern have to do with me? My job is to remove sin. My hour has not yet come. It's not time for me to die on the cross yet. You want me to solve these people's problems. These people have a problem where they're running out of wine, and that's a problem. You're looking to me for a solution. My solution, the thing I'm coming here, is to solve sin, to overcome sin. That's the solution. But then his mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. I think this is, and this is just me how I read it, this is his mother looking at Jesus going, hey, whatever he says, do it. She's not the one in charge. A lot of people will read like she was, one of the people organizing stuff, or maybe she was serving. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say any of that. It just says, his mother turned to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. Mary probably knew this family. Jesus probably knew this family. They all probably knew each other. So this was a really embarrassing thing because they ran out of wine. And so cultural step would have said, hey, go do stuff. But Jesus is focused on his ministry now. Now, for those of you all who are saying, Jaron, that's pretty harsh that you're saying this, let's put a pin in this and let's go to Mark chapter 3. So you've got the Gospel of John, right? It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let's go to Mark chapter 3 real fast. This is Mark chapter 3. Jesus is teaching about the Holy Spirit. He's teaching here, and this is later on in the ministry, but it's a different book, but this is Mark chapter 3 because Mark 4 starts right there. So Mark chapter 3 verse 32. It says, "Look, your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you." See, he's over here. Jesus is teaching earlier, and he says, but when his own people, his, mother, brothers, heard about this, they went to lay hold of him. So people who knew Jesus were embarrassed about him talking about the divisions, basically are saying, how can I have the power to cast out demons and heal the sick? A house divided can't stand. And so people are like, yo, go get this guy. He's embarrassing himself. So they went to lay hold on him. They went to go take him away. Jesus, you're embarrassing yourself, man. For they said, he is out of his mind. These are his own people. This is people Jesus knew, listening to Jesus preach, and they're saying he's out of his mind. So people that Jesus knew personally in his life came to him and said he's out of his mind. Well, so then they went to go get people, and who'd they get? They got his mother. Who's Jesus' mother? Mary. And his brothers. Your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you. And then Jesus answered them saying, who is my mother or my brothers? So you see, this is another instance, Mark chapter 3, whenever Jesus is looking at his flesh and blood mother and brothers, and he's like, who are my mother and my brothers? And he sat around and lit in his circle, and he said about them, and he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my brother and my sister, or whoever does the will of God is my brother and my sister and my mother. Jesus is related to them, yes, but Jesus' focus and his ministry is on obeying God. There is a departure between Jesus doing his ministry and Jesus following God to him obeying his mother and doing stuff. And this, in other words, his mom and his brothers coming to seek him because he's out of his mind, Jesus ignores them. He doesn't ask for their opinion. He doesn't ask for their input. He's not listening to them whenever they say, hey, come here, Jesus, you're insulting yourself. You look dumb. People are going to make fun of you. So if you try to go through someone's mother or someone's brother or a saint or someone else to go to Jesus, he doesn't hear them because they think that he was out of his mind whenever he was talking about God. Christians go, people who believe the Bible go straight to Jesus. Let's get back to John chapter 2. That's just a little bit about how God works. There is no in-between. If you're a Christian, there is no in-between. You go straight to God. All right, so she says, whatever he says, do it. Now it says, there were 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews. Now, see, there were Old Testament rules about having to wash and do stuff before you ate. And the Jews, remember, Jews is religious elites. These are the blue check markers. These are the first-round draft picks, according to the manner of purification of the Jews. So these rules had become so in part of their culture that was kind of how they lived. That was directing, how they do stuff. And so there's these 6 water pots of stone, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. So let's just say 6 water pots containing 20 or 30 gallons. Let's just say they all did 20. It says 20 or 30, okay, but let's just say 20. 6 times 20 is 120. So 6 water pots of stone, minimum 20 gallons apiece, is 120 gallons. That's a lot of stuff. Now, with this, here's what I think. You have people who, these water pots are for washing their hands, ceremonially cleansing themselves before they eat. That amount of water, at least 120 gallons, you could baptize someone in that. You could put that into a tub or wherever, and you could baptize. So whereas people are sitting here washing their hands to purify themselves before they eat, Jesus is dealing with enough water to do more things. Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them up to the brim. Okay, so there's no space. The brim is the top. So there's no space. And then somewhere between this little period and that, they got turned into wine. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. No abracadabra. The Bible doesn't talk about any hand motions. It's just, he didn't draw attention to it. He just says, fill the water pots up with water. And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, draw some out now. Which means that right there was the very first miracle. So the Bible doesn't even explain how the miracle happened. It just happened. Here's the other thing that proves Jesus' divinity. This is creation. There was nothing there. There was no wine there. In order to get wine, you need to get grapes. But those grapes have to be crushed. That crush takes time to ferment. It has to take time to grow on the vine. It has to take time to harvest. The seeds got to grow the vine. The vine's got to grow over time. You got to have dirt. There was none of that. Nothing requiring wine existed. Jesus just created. In the Old Testament, when the word creation or created is used, the Hebrew word bara, that is only ever used as an act of creation by God. Jesus here barad wine out of nothing. There was water to the brim. How can Jesus turn water into wine? He has to have grapes, or he's got to have something that comes from the earth. Except that he doesn't. He's Jesus. He's God. He creates out of nothing. That's why this miracle, every miracle, has salvific implications, which means it's about the deity of Christ. Every single miracle is pointing to who Christ is. That's why miracles happen. Miracles happened, and Jesus did miracles. The disciples were able to do miracles to point to the gospel, to point to the Holy Spirit. In this case, when Jesus when they fill him up with water and he changes it to wine, he creates wine out of nothing. Now, what's important is, we'll get to that here in a second. And he said to them, draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast. This master of the feast would have been like the maitre d', the person that's in charge of serving everybody and making sure people are filled and whatnot. And so up here, they ran out of wine. This guy is not able to do his job. So you can probably imagine some anxiety. There's probably some commotion, gossiping, some whisperings like, oh, this groom's really bad. He's such an embarrassment, and blah, blah, blah. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from, remember, the master of the feast is the dude that's in charge of bringing out the food and the wine and all the other stuff. So he would have known, everything's empty. The goose ain't cooked, or the sheep's underdone, or, the tablecloth is stained or whatever. This guy was the guy that's in charge of all the stuff. So he had tasted the water that was made, and he did not know where it came from. So you bring the guy that's supposed to have situational awareness over the entire wedding, and he's like, I don't know where this came from. But the servants who had drawn the water, so the servants knew where the wine came from because they were there. They're standing right there. Jesus didn't tell people to leave the room. He didn't say anything special. He didn't Jedi mind trick his hands. He just said, fill it up, fill the water pots with water. And they filled them. And they said, draw some water out. Nothing special. Just creating water out of wine. No big deal. No, it didn't have to say anything. Didn't have to do nothing. Just okay, so when it says, and did not know where it came from, but the servants knew. So Jesus didn't even have to go tell people. That's why it's awesome, is that Jesus does stuff, and then there's people who observe. The servants who had drawn the water saw Jesus turn the water into wine. And so whenever the stuff that Jesus does come into other people who have no knowledge of what had happened, there's always this disconnect. So the master of the feast, who's in charge of everything, doesn't know what the servants know. So Jesus did his did his miracle in front of people who were lower than the people in charge. This is going to be a thing. Jesus likes to work with people who aren't the ones in charge. He works with the nobodies. He works with the servants. Go fill these guys up with water. Oh yeah, and by the way, wow, here you go, brand new wine. The master of the feast called the bridegroom. Okay, so probably would have been something like, hey, attention, let me pull this bridegroom away. This guy's probably been like, hey, is everything okay? I hope everything's fine. And he said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine, and when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. Everyone does this. If you ever come over to my house in the homestead, and if I feed you dinner, then if you just keep eating, because weddings are 7 days long, so if you just keep eating and drinking and doing stuff, then eventually I'm going to run out of like the food I made for you, and you're going to have to like go to the fridge and get leftovers and make a PB&J or something. And so the good stuff is prepared up at the beginning, and then if you eat me out of house and home, then I have to go get the bad stuff. But this guy, the master of the feast, is saying you've done just the opposite. You have kept the good wine until now. Now, a little bit talk about this. A lot of people like to focus, or I shouldn't say a lot of people. Some people will focus on the alcoholic content of the wine. Let's just put it this way. Jesus made this from nothing. So if Jewish culture, to be drunk is to, be a sin and it's bad behavior to be frowned upon, right? Just know that this is like perfect wine. It's perfect wine because Jesus made it out of nothing. Focusing on whether it was alcoholic or not alcoholic is trying to get into trying to read something into the Bible that it's not. The point is, Jesus made wine out of nothing. You can debate the alcoholic content all day long, but people in Jewish culture would have diluted the wine. They would have diluted the wine with 2 parts water and 1 part wine so that they did not get drunk. Getting drunk was not something that they wanted to do. And so it would have been, you can debate it either way, but the Bible doesn't tell you. It's just that you could kind of think about, would Jesus want people to get drunk? Well, Jesus is going to fill it up to the brim, and he's going to make it a brand new wine. So a lot of people get caught up with the alcoholic, water to wine kind of thing. I'm just looking at this thing going, do you not understand that Jesus created something out of nothing? That's the point of this miracle. The point of the miracle is to point to him being God. Yes, he affirms marriage by showing up. Yes, he affirms biblical marriage by showing up. But the point of this whole parable is this beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana. Remember in John chapter 20, what do we say the signs were for? So that they believed. That's what it's for. When people get into alcoholic wine or, there are people who believe central aspects of their theology is that, Jesus' mom came to him and asks him a question and then he does it. So there are some people who build their theology off of, we have to go to Mary because when Mary asked Jesus to do stuff, he did stuff. Well, that's not what this says. This says when the mother came to Jesus, she's not even named by name, but when the mother came to Jesus, they have no wine. He says, woman, ma'am, talks to her like a stranger. And then we pointed out Mark 3, where you don't get in between Jesus and his mission. My hour has not yet come. His mission was to die on the cross to take care of sins. The purpose of this whole story is beginning of signs. This was the first sign. The first miracle that John lists in the Gospel of John is that Jesus created wine out of nothing. He created wine out of nothing. That's the miracle. Only God can create. Hold on, my camera's messed up. Only God can create. Jesus just created. Jesus just proved his divinity to a small wedding in no-name town Galilee. Right? That's the point. That's why he did. And he manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So that's it. Jesus, in chapter 1, had just called his disciples, right? He's like, you're going to see a lot of cool stuff. He's talking to Nathaniel, saying, he's like, you guys are going to see a lot of cool stuff. And then the very next day, what do? They go to a wedding where they open up, or he makes wine from water, and then boom, manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. John is writing this whole book so that people believe in him. And follows up, and he went down to Capernaum, he, his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they did not stay there for many days. So he did his sign, he did his thing, and then they did him out of there. They popped smoke and they left. But the reason why John writes the reason why John wrote his gospel is so that people believe in him. All of this is pointing to the fact that Jesus made wine right here. The Bible doesn't even tell you what happens. It just happens. That little space between verse 7 and verse 8, that's when the creation happens. So the very first sign, think about that, the very first sign that Jesus does is to demonstrate that he can create something out of nothing. And it happens here, and the Bible doesn't even talk about how it happens. It just happens. That's the cool part. But that is a sign so that we may believe. Next Saturday, we'll be picking up right where we left, right here in John chapter 2, verse 13. Appreciate your time. God bless you.